So the hype of no labels is was non-existent in the first place. Okay, all this talk about no labels, all it was a Republican and Democratic think tank organization that was hyped up by corporate media to scare people of who are lacking critical thinking into thinking, oh, no labels, it's going to get more people to support no labels, and then Biden won't win the White House. No labels is not a serious third party, just like the Forward Party. I mean, this is the case of it. And same thing too. Look, I can make an argument for the People's Party too. These are three organizations not serious. Now, the Greens, the Libertarians, they've been serious. They've been able. Well, the Greens, I have my criticism of them, but when it comes down to third parties, you need to have ballot access and somebody who's running under your banner. Now, what are we seeing now? As No Labels abandons its plans for third-party tickets, the Democrats are now focusing their attacks on Greens, most notably Dr. Jill Stein, the Libertarians, to some extent Dr. Cornel West, and now they're focusing most of their attacks on RFK Jr. Now, my criticism of all of these candidates, but nonetheless, I find it interesting now that since the Democratic primary was lackluster and mediocre to begin with, how all this focus and energy is now being driven towards third parties and independents. And we have already seen how third parties and independents are struggling right now to get ballot access. The only party right now that has succeeded in getting all the states has been the Libertarian Party. The next party that's coming afterwards, second place, is the Greens. Then there's RFK Jr., who has gotten a few states, and then Dr. Cornel West, who has, well, I don't even know what to say about his campaign anymore. I think RBN has said all that needs to be said about Dr. Cornel West and his campaign. So if you want to see a more brutal takedown of Dr. Cornel West, check out RBN. I can't recommend it enough. 10 out of 10. Yeah. They dragged him through the coals. So there you go. But let's go ahead and pull up this video here. Shout out again to Case Study QB, who's wrongly being censored. Go ahead and play this video.
No Labels is officially no more. In a statement today, CEO Nancy Jacobson announced that the group would end its efforts to launch a third-party ticket after no candidates emerged. That leaves only one third-party candidate left, RFK Jr., and his campaign has some Democrats, quote, freaked out and ready to mobilize. Back with us tonight, Jennifer Palmieri, former White House Communications Director for President Obama, and Tim Miller, host of the Bulwark podcast and the former Communications Director for Jeb Bush. Jennifer, the threat of a no labels ticket is gone. They couldn't find a candidate. What's your take?
Right. Yeah, I'm one of those Democrats who's freaked out about RFK Jr. and I'm ready to mobilize. Stephanie, it's I think that I hope what happened with no labels will repeat itself here. Although I think that this is RFK Jr. is more complicated. I think Democrats, I guess anti-Trump forces are really aligned, and the fact that all of these candidates who looked at the possibility, who are serious, who are serious leaders that looked at the possibility of possibly joining the no labels ticket and decided that all it could do was help Trump and no one would do it, right? That's sort of an early indicator of concern in the populace writ large about the possibility of Trump winning. And I think it reflects a larger concern that Democrats can sort of, not be
Notice, and again, I had to play this just for a long up because it always gets down to the point of Donald Trump. The fear of Trump. Trump is their end-all, be-all excuse. Not improving policy, not about being better, not about having a strong candidacy. It's all about Trump and saying he's the bad guy, and then assuming that Joe Biden is going to be the hero.
Place in about that can count on will be there to fight Trump. And now you got to turn that to RFK Jr., who, even if he gets just a small portion.
And then, of course, now the attack comes to RFK Jr. and the fact that he is doing very well in polling. Now, I have my criticism for RFK Jr. However, it's his right to run for president, as it is for Biden and Trump and anybody else that's in this election cycle, or anyone else that's running for any kind of office. It is their right. However, this blame game of RFK Jr. Well, gee, Democrats, maybe you wouldn't have to worry about RFK Jr. if Democrats actually followed through with their campaign promises and actually carrying out with progressive policies. But because you're neoliberal hack frauds, you're going to put this blame on voters. Now, my vote is going to go to the person who's going to earn my vote. All right? That's just how it's going to play out. I don't owe any politician, no matter where they stand politically, my vote. You got to earn my vote. Same thing for all of you that are watching.
Of the vote. And he's a little more complicated because I think his appeal could be that he appears to be independent. We're starting to see a lot of questions arise about his funding, it being backed by Trump supporters. Some of the, there's some questions today about a sort of pro-pardoning Jan 6 comments that they made. If he's seen to be someone who is aligned with Trump, not, and not who he claims to be, not as independent as he claims to be, I think that will really hurt him. But this notion of someone who's sort of independent, not of either party, is a real threat, even if it's just 2-3 percentage points. That could be a margin of victory.
Tim, before we get to RFK, just what's your take on what happened?
Yes, because it all has to lead up to how people are voting. I don't care. Okay, if someone's going to vote for RFK Jr. or Dr. Jill Stein or the Libertarians or Dr. Cornel West, that's your choice. And if you're not going to vote either, that's your choice too. Remember, the Democrats have abused progressives. All that talk that they did in 2020, they didn't follow through with it. And I knew that they were never going to follow through with it. And to all those critics who were giving myself and everyone else in independent media a hard time, why are you so scared now? Now, because you want to vilify people who support third parties and independents. And yes, I will even encourage people, if you don't want to vote, stay home. What more are you going to do? Yell at us? Scream at us on social media? I'm living rent-free in your head, as should the rest of my audience, as they should indeed, because it's the one thing to do. It's the right thing to do, because these politicians, they don't like us. They don't think about us. They don't respect us. So why should we give them the time of day when they have made it very clear how they feel about us? Now, Democrats, you had opportunities. You've had numerous opportunities, especially when you had supermajorities in the U.S. Senate and House, when you had a Democrat in the White House. But what have you done? You acted like the neoliberal hack frauds that you are. And now what? You're dusting out old Bernie Sanders and everybody else to defend you. Now you're trying to bring out the fact that third parties are a threat and somehow it's going to help out the orange boogeyman. You want to bring in voter enthusiasm. Maybe you should have actually followed through with policies that would have made our lives better. But people are struggling, and I see it from my audience. I see it from every single live stream I watch in independent media. Everyone's saying the same thing. Everybody's talking about it. Times are tough under Joe Biden. And now, as we get closer and closer to November, because right now we're in April, but November is right around the corner. And then look, surprise, surprise, you need our help again. You're begging for help again.
Happened to no labels. I mean, for months, Nancy and her squad were out there fundraising, full steam ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I felt from the start that Nancy Jacobson, Mark Penn, and the big no labels donors were mostly delusional about the possibility that they could find a candidate, about the possibility that that candidate could win, about what the impact of such a candidate would be. I think there were people out there who argued that this was a nefarious effort, that this was kind of some Trump stalking horse. And I do think it's worth saying, I never felt that way. I think it's pretty clear today, based on the decision, that was not the case. And, with respect to the late Joe Lieberman, I think that what this really was just a lot of naivete from people in the group and a lot of rich people in New York who thought that there was a broader interest in like a center-right center candidate than there is. I think most people who are in that vein are for Joe Biden and like Joe Biden occupies the center of this race. Maybe he's a little bit more left than various people would want them to be on one issue or another, but broadly speaking, he's acceptable. Donald Trump is unacceptable. And so it's hard to recruit somebody in that environment. And I think that's why they came up empty.
You know what that is? No, everyone knew it was a way to rake in money. It was a way to get people hyped up and to build up other organizations that would be semi-connected to no labels. It was nothing but smoke and mirrors. No labels was nothing but a joke.
Jennifer, you were mentioning some of the things that certainly make RFK Jr. sound and be more right than people realize.
Right.
But the voters he could potentially pull, are they actually paying attention to the ins and outs of what he says, or are they drawn to this new face, different guy, young VP candidate coming from Silicon Valley, and they don't.
Oh, and Dan Grant, you're asking about what happened to them. What happens to the money? Hold on. You asked a very serious question. Now, the truth is that money is, well, gone. But here, let's go ahead and bring in the politician, the Washington, D.C. talk. That's a very fantastic question about the money and where it's going to go. But right now, what we need to focus on is building and reaching out to voters. And what we do plan to do is put things on hold for the time being in order to reorganize, reevaluate, and reassess the situation at hand. Because what we're seeing here is a mass movement of things that are happening in DC that are lightning fast, that require immediate attention. And in turn, with the support that we are getting, we hope to inform all the people who are there, who have been absolutely great, who have been reaching out to us through community calls and Skype meetings and everything else in regards towards really assessing a situation, so that we in turn could be ready for potential elections that would require more support by voters. And in turn, we hope to have these communications and talks further on down the road, which is why this is fantastic, because it will help down the road into building more. That's called a word salad. So that's what happened to the money. Okay. The money went bye-bye. The money went gone. What money? Why do you bring up money? Money. What is that 5-letter word?
Actually know what they're getting into, but he could attract young voters that President Biden is banking on.
I think right now there's polls that show him getting about 14% of the vote, or at least I've seen those in the last couple of months. And I think you're right. That's what it is, right? It's people are exhausted by the sort of, current political stalemate. This sounds like something new. They like the name of a Kennedy. And they like, his first ad that he did was very well done. And it was sort of like, if you're tired of both sides, here's something different. Here's an independent. And that could sound like a relief. But it's only been a couple of months where people have started to look at him seriously. And there's a couple of groups that have formed to take him on. And the DNC, I know, is doing that as well. And already you're starting, people will be educated about who this guy is and what he's really for. And I think that will turn off a large swath of voters. That's one chunk of voters that he will lose. Then there's the messaging that needs to happen about you help him, you are helping elect Trump. I mean, there's one way to stop Donald Trump, and that is to elect Joe Biden president, period, end of discussion. And,
Yes, end the discussion. But okay, let's switch things around, because we're not going to be talking about RFK Jr. all day. Let's talk about really the real issue that Democrats are going to have to deal with, and that is the uncommitted movement. And this is my direct challenge to the uncommitted movement. You're going to have to show yourselves where you're going to stand politically. And the thing is, I know a lot of you are gaining ground. I want to pull up this video from Dr. Jill Stein. The uncommitted movement. What you did was show the Democrats that you are not loyal to them. And the uncommitted vote in the state of Michigan, for example, did better than Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson combined. Let's play this video.
As we saw recently, in the Michigan primary, not only did 14% say we have abandoned Biden. So there's a substantial portion within the Democrats who are looking for something else.
You think the uncommitted have abandoned the president?
Well, that's a term, in fact, that they are using. It's the abandoned Biden movement. It's essentially people who say, we're not voting for Biden, that Biden has really led us into this genocide. He does not have our vote. And there are many who showed up. But an even bigger demographic are those who refused to even show up for the Democratic primary. And in fact, the turnout was half the numbers that it was in 2020. So that tells you there is now a huge bucket of people who are looking for something to vote for. It's entirely misleading to say that Greens are taking votes away. No, actually, we are giving people an opportunity to vote who otherwise wouldn't be coming out to vote.
Now, I also want to pull this video up here, too. Shout out to Neoliberal Tears, where a Democrat who voted uncommitted in Michigan tells C-SPAN that she'll be voting for Dr. Jill Stein in November.
Uncommitted Michigan primary voters. I was thinking about staying home, but when I heard uncommitted, I was like, yes, I want at least my voice registered, my one little vote, saying that I'm done voting for the lesser of two evils, so to speak. And I agree with everything that you say, Dr. Stein, and I just keep doing what you're doing. And, you know, one of my Medicare for All is just so important for everybody. And
so Laura,
you know,
do you plan on voting for Jill Stein there in Michigan?
Yes, if she's the Green Party nominee and she's on the ballot, yes, I will vote for her.
No shame. No shame at all. Now, to you, my viewing audience, I know a lot of you have dealt with people who are lacking the ability to think critically, people who constantly want to bully and harass individuals because what? You are actually exercising your fundamental right, your choice to vote however which way you feel. It's your right to do so, as you should. You shouldn't be ashamed of it at all. The Democratic Party is an institution that thrives on lying to its voting base. And we're expected what? To fall in line? We already fell for the trick for Bernie Sanders not once but twice, because then he told us to vote for his good friend Joe. And also, don't forget how he told us to vote for Hillary Clinton. And we saw how Bernie Sanders was in a super fast rush to help defend his good friend Joe. And we're going to be talking about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren for the next segment, because those two, once again, disappoint as always.
And I just want to say one other thing quick that maybe she can speak to. You know, money in politics.
And also, shout out to Gray Walker, joined third party. Semper Fidelis, my brother. The presidential election is theater. It stirs up apathy to keep people away from the races that matter, your state and local elections. Those are the ones that matter the most, folks. Remember that.
When the Supreme Court said that money is speech, I feel like that was the beginning of the end for any kind of true representation of the working class in this country. And maybe you want to say something about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everything you've said there. I really appreciate where you're coming from. And this is what we are hearing out on the campaign trail. So many people who used to be Democrats and people actually who used to be Republicans as well, and who feel like these big parties that are swimming in corporate money have really abandoned working Americans. They've abandoned young people. They've abandoned students. They've abandoned seniors, you know, whose Medicare is being privatized right out from under them, and people aren't even aware. And it's being done without their knowledge. You know, people are really being hurt by the system. They are standing up and rejecting it. And what the previous caller had to say is, you know, what I'm hearing and seeing all.
We see that all the time. So just returning back to this one segment right here, I know it's from BSDNC, but bear with me. These people live in their own reality, because after seeing how people are willing to vote uncommitted, how people are actually going to follow through with that statement, you have to remember, shout out to Courtesy Flush Prime, they don't want everyone to show up. They don't want people to show up, period. Now, I know we're all impressed with how third parties are, you know, right now getting front and center, but this is a last-ditch desperate attempt by corporate media to trigger people into being afraid of how this election will play out. No matter what you do, no matter what your choice is on November, on election night, when it comes to that day, once you vote or choose not to vote, tomorrow will be a new day, and you won't be able to control the aftermath of what happens. Whoever sits on the throne, they will be irrelevant. But what does matter, as Gray Walker did post in the comments right there that I showed up, state and local elections will matter, and also what you do the day after. We need to start building up mutual aid groups and actually start supporting citizen ballot initiatives to fight for that better future. That's what's necessary.
That will also take away a number of voters for him, I think, in the end. And then there's just a question of who hangs on because they find him appealing for whatever reason. And those people might be turned off if they learned who's funding him, if he doesn't appear to be as independent as he is. I think those are sort of the three lanes that Democrats that are trying to stop him can look at. It's not who he says he is. There's a lot of crazy stuff that he is for, and if you vote for him, you're going to help Trump. I feel pretty good about our ability to make those arguments, but still, 1-2 percentage points could be the difference. It's really scary.
Tim, what do you think?
No one cares what you think, Tim. We're pausing it right there. After seeing all these meltdown articles by corporate media, This is just classic. This is classic third party hate, independent hate. And I, for one, encourage people to make your own choice. These attacks against third parties, such as the Greens or against the Libertarians, or even against RFK Jr. and Cornel West, are childish at best. The media realizes that their good candidate, Joe Biden, in which they formed a shield wall around, people aren't taking him seriously. We see this. And when it comes down to organizations like No Labels, I can once again sit back, relax, and say, I saw this happening a mile away. I knew they weren't a serious organization. I knew that they were never, ever going to follow through with any of their promise of running a third-party candidate. They said they were going to have somebody like Joe Manchin and Cinema under their banner. That was never going to happen. What it was, and if you were a person that gave money to something like No Labels, please continue watching Hard Lens Media, because we were warning people, don't fall for that trap. It is nothing more than a trick. It's an illusion, smoke and mirrors. They were never serious. They were never going to follow through. No Labels, as an institution, as an organization, were never, ever going to weigh in on this election cycle. They weren't serious. It was all about a way to rake in money. And if you're wondering what they're going to do in the future, they're probably going to disappear in the wind, and no one will ever know that they existed, because they will be mediocre and forgotten. Remember, folks, always ask yourself, especially when something like a No Labels rears its head, who's behind it? Why did they come out? Why are they getting so much attention by the media? Because the one thing that concerned me when I first heard the name No Labels, never forget all the media press and buzz around them, like they were front and center. It's almost as if it was manufactured. That's a thing we got to worry about for third parties and independents in the future. These fake manufactured parties that distract people.